DLA Night. With me today, I've got Phil Fraser, and we're going to be talking about hiring your second in command. So, what that means is that you've set up a business, it's successful as a founder, and what you need to do is actually step back and let someone else run it. Which is, it's like it's like having children and letting them go off and do their own thing and stuff like that. So, Phil, thank you so much for coming in today and sharing your expertise on this. Where can people find you?
Okay, so the best place to find me is my website, which is philfraser.co.uk. Don't go to philfraser.com because that's a medieval costume company. So if you see pictures of people like Robin Hood, you're in the wrong place. So it's philfraser.co.uk, or search me out on LinkedIn. I'm usually on there most days.
Phil, again, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your expertise. I think it's fascinating that quite often I've got an interview coming up is it next week or something about raising money, and the things that you needed to do, but to raise money. But here we are talking about you've set up a startup, you're successful in that, and you're going to hand that over to people. So talk us through. Your how you got there, and just to give us a quick overview about how we got to that position.
Yeah, so my wife and I set up a business by accident, which is a completely different story. We could do that again next time. And after, let's think, it's about after 10 years, I got bored, and that's bored in a sort of entrepreneurial sense. The business was going well, it was all going okay. And, as entrepreneurs, we like doing new things and setting things up and all that sort of thing. So we said, right, okay, we'll sell it. But we also had a plan B, which was if we don't sell it, we'll get somebody else in to run it. Right. So we got an offer. We decided in the end it wasn't enough. So we said, right, okay, let's put plan B into action, which is where we come to how the hell do you find somebody else to do all the stuff you've been doing for the last 10 years and it's your baby and nobody can do it as well as you can and all those other things.
So you actually when you found, maybe by accident, a process that you went through in terms of trying to find that, because the normal thing that we would do is that you'd either reach out to your network to say, is there anybody that you think would be wanting to do this, or you'd put a job out there, or you'd get recruitment consultants or something, and ultimately what you'd do is you'd get a pile of CVs, but that's not what you wanted to do.
No, we had, and I don't know where I picked this up from. The next stage I'll tell you about. It was very much a case of, the first thing was I needed to be able to get on with this person. Yeah. And, it's my baby, as with most people's businesses, and you want to hand it over. But the first thing is, yes, they might be able to functionally do the job, but you've got to be able to get on with them. And somebody suggested to me, I can't remember where it came from. Somebody suggested to me, take your applicants out for a coffee, because then the first thing you're finding out is, can I get on with this person? Yeah. And that's what I did. So we went to a recruitment consultant, and actually, sorry, I'm a step ahead. The first thing you need to do is to determine what the role of the person is, because you've been doing everything. You go, okay, this guy's going to come in. Is he going to do everything? Is he? Oh, sorry, girl, apologies. Is he going to do everything I do? And if so, what am I going to do? Or is usually the case, he's going to do some of the things I'm going to do. So I've got to determine what I'm going to do. And this has led me to something I talk to clients about and I write about quite a lot, is when you do this, the first thing that drops out is you have to write yourself a job description.
Right.
As CEO, MD, owner, whatever you want to call yourself. Because everybody else in the organization has got a job description. So, you know what they're doing, what their targets are, all that sort of thing. So you've sliced yourself in two and you're getting this new person in, but you're keeping some of the stuff. So it makes you think, okay, what's my job? Yeah. And what's his or her job? And only then can you determine, okay, we'll go out to recruitment consultants and start the process. So going back to where I was. So what we did was we spoke to recruitment consultants and said, here's the job spec. And a lot of part of the job spec was person and personality, not just can you do this, can you do that. And I said, okay, I want to take everybody out for coffee first before they come in for an interview. And the weirdest thing happened was that everybody who came, they all came through a recruitment consultant, and they all came and met me for coffee. No CVs, none of that sort of stuff. It was just, neutral ground in, Starbucks or somewhere, or a hotel. And everybody was really, really honest and open. And I saw the real person, not the interview person. And you found out so much more about the person than the usual, all right, talk me through your CV, what have you done, where did you go, what have you learned, that sort of thing. So that was the first stage of our process, the second stage. The first was determining what they're going to do. The second stage was, okay, what's this person like?
Because I think that what happens is that you get to a certain point in your life where you're so used to doing interviews, you kind of, as you say, you kind of turn up and there's this process that you go through.
Yeah.
And of course, I get loads of people telling me about how much they want to work for my business, and it's like everybody says it to the point where you become completely immune to when people say, oh, yeah, this is my calling, and you go like, yeah, like everybody says this.
Yeah, my calling is to work with Tim Hughes. That's my calling in life.
My calling is to work with Tim Hughes. Really? And so I think this idea that you actually took them out for a coffee. Even part of the process of who pays for the coffee and the discussion that you have is probably quite interesting. I recently went out with somebody who had just exited from a company. Clearly, he'd made a lot of money from it, and we said, "Oh, let's meet up for a coffee." And he said, "I'd love to pick your brain for to find out what I'm going to do next," and I paid.
And he's got this big pile of money sat.
And he's got this big pile of money. It's like, I got home and I got home and said to my partner, I said,
yeah, it says a lot about people, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
And it was interesting because as I say, these people had come via a recruitment consultant. They knew it was an interview, and didn't have, after the first couple of minutes, they didn't have their interview head on, which was great. So that was our first level of filter. Was okay, CV might be perfect, but there's not that chemistry. It's not like I don't like you. It was just that, that chemistry's not there. We're going to be in each other's pockets, 5 days a week and sometimes at weekends, and we're going to be smashing our brains together. And I've got to trust him with my baby. Some of that's emotional, some of that's personality, and some of it's skill. So that was a great first filter.
So I understand the process that you went through was you wrote the brief, then you did a pre-interview coffee, then you did an interview about can you do the job. Then you had a second interview, which was 2 business scenarios and a presentation. And then there was a third interview. I'm reading my notes, so I may be completely wrong. You asked for, was it a 90-day plan? So was it a 30, 60, 90 or something?
That was the what you've got as the second and the third were the same thing. So the first formal interview was run through your CV. It's answering the question, can you do the job?
Yeah.
And the second interview, so we gave them 2 scenarios. One was here, and it was a real life business scenario at the time. We had this issue with a client. How would you deal with it? And the second one was, okay, first 90 days, what would you do? So the first one is, can you do the job? The second one is, how will you do the job?
Yep.
And interestingly, we went through this process, and we got down to our last 2. Then somebody pulled out, and we were left with this lady who came in, did her presentation, and myself and wife did the interview, and it just wasn't. There was just something wasn't right. So we had to go all the way back to square one and did the whole process again. And the guy who eventually got the job, actually and I've told him this subsequently, his how I would do the job bit of his presentation wasn't brilliant. He was sort of sat on the fence a little bit, and he was very uncommittal, which obviously, you can understand. But he got the job. So the process got to that point. But he asked me, and this sort of goes on to the next point, he asked me the question in the interview, are you willing to let go?
Yes.
Which I thought was a great question. Because the last thing he or anybody in a senior role like that wants to do is they come in and they're just doing what they're told by the CEO or MD or owner.
Yes.
And I said, I'm ready to let go, knock yourself out sort of thing. So that was and again, I think mentally you have to, as the owner, MD, CEO, whatever you call yourself, you have to be at that point to even go through this process.
Absolutely. Because otherwise it doesn't work, does it? Down the road, there's going to be a parting of the ways.
Yeah, because he or she is going to say, will you just let me get on with my job? No, you want to do it this way. This is the way we do it. And again, one of the things that was great about getting somebody in like that was that they then, and obviously this is what you want them to do, they start bringing their own ideas in. So, as with any business, any startup business, you do it how either you did it when you were employed or how you've read about doing it or however you've eventually come to systems and processes. But you want somebody at that seniority to come in and go, well, that's stupid. I think we should, in my previous company or the way I do it is this way. Have you looked at this? Have you looked at that? Have you considered this? So he brought loads of new thinking in.
And how did you feel about that?
It was interesting. And we worked together for 6 years until we sold the business. We sold the business 5 years ago. I had a beer with him 2 weeks ago. So we're still in touch. But there was a lot of, obviously, at first, you've got to sort of, it's a bit, finding your way around and where the borders are. And it goes back to what I was saying about job specs, that legitimately he can say to me, hang on, Phil, that's not part of your job. Your job is over here. My job's over here. And yeah, it's learning and teaching and him learning how I work and me learning how he works. But you have to be able to let go. And almost you have to let them make the mistakes. And the other side of it as well is, my team were used to sort of knocking on my office door and going, Phil, I've got this issue, blah, 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 blah. So the first time you have to say to your team, don't speak to me, speak to him, and the team go, well, hang on a minute. And then because it's somebody new, they've come in from, who the hell's he? I've been I've worked here for, insert number of years. Who the hell's he? He's just turned up. He's been here 6 months. I've got to report to him, or I've got to ask him advice, or he's telling me what to do. All those nuances come through as well.
Yeah. And you used to do something and now somebody else does it. So,
yeah.
And one of the, I think one of the things that you picked up was the fact that when you were running the business, you knew all the customers. And then you realized one day you didn't know all the customers.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and again, it goes through the process. So the onboarding is multifaceted. Onboarding is right. This is the business. This is how we work. This is what we do. So you're teaching him. Then you have to onboard the team with him or her. So my number 2 is called Simon. This is Simon. He's going to be running it. He's who you're reporting to. And then you have to do it with the clients. And the client said, this is Simon, and you're going to deal with him. And so initially, we both go along, and I go, this is Simon. Then we sort of tag teamed along. And then he got to the point where people were saying, where's Phil? And then he got to the point where we went to an event, and he was introducing me to people who were clients of the business. And I'd never been in a situation where I didn't know every single client of the business. But it's part of that growing up to become a proper grown-up business.
Yeah, it's one of those things when you walk down the corridor and there's somebody and you don't know who they are.
We never got to that size, but it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same.
And it's like and they say, I've been working here 6 months or something. Okay, right, excellent. Well, welcome aboard.
No, we never got to that size, but it's a similar sort of thing. It's a similar sort of thing.
So how did you because you've got to trust this person, haven't you?
Yep.
How is it that you I know it sounds like you got the TT or something. Anyway,
I've got the window open.
Okay, in modern, I interview a lot of people, and the modern world of leadership is you trust everybody. But I'm guessing this was a few years ago. So, in those days, you treated everybody with suspicion rather than trust. How do you get to the point where you can actually trust a person?
I always come from the position of my wife says this all the time. I trust people too much.
Right.
Assumption of everyone's a good person and you should trust them and let them get on with it.
Okay.
And
so you're kind of in that camp anyway.
It's me. My wife's completely different. And I say we ran it was interesting. She always tells me this story. We did every single interview. Towards the end, she only did the final interviews, but she constantly tells me this. The one person she didn't do the final interview with was one of the only people we had a problem with. So I'm the trusting one. She's the untrusting one. So we have this sort of balance. But yeah, I just look, if you've got to that point where you've got a big enough business and you're recruiting a number two, you should by then have, spidey senses to be able to see who the bullshitters are and who aren't. I think we got found out twice in 15 years in terms of recruiting, I don't know, I think probably total 25 to 30 people. I got 2 of them wrong. It's not a bad hit rate.
It's not. So I mean, so I was going to ask you about what do you do about people issues, because one of the things that, when you join a company, what you're doing is that you're in effect, I'm joining and I'm working with Phil. I'm in effect, I not just sign a contract with Phil, but I sign a psychological contract with Phil. And all of a sudden you're saying it's somebody else. So how do you deal with those people issues?
I think you have to, and sometimes I look at business now and I think, geez, I'd hate to be running a business now because it's such a minefield.
Yeah.
But I always just started with, look, I trust you. We've been through 2 interviews. I think I've got a feel for you. If it gets to the point where you think, well, actually, you aren't the person you said you were, or it's not working as well as we think it should. And again, it's something I fell foul of, was this whole concept of oh God, what's the bloody word? Brilliant jerks.
Right.
That people who either you've recruited and aren't what they think they are, or more likely somebody who's okay at their job but is causing so much problem within the rest of the team, that actually you've got to get rid of them. And we took far too long getting rid of ours. But recruitment is always a minefield in terms of who turns up and who, are you seeing the real person in the interview? This is my business. I'm trusting you to run my business, make it better, add value to it. And if you don't do that side of the bargain, sometimes you take it personally.
Yeah, I mean, toxicity in your business is a nasty thing, and we had it, and we didn't deal with it fast enough, and we should have done.
Yep. Sorry, I just sorry to interject over you.
No, it's your interview, Phil.
I was advised by somebody else told me about Brilliant Jerks, and we discussed the whole thing. And he said, I guarantee the day after you do it, you get rid of them, you will say, we should have done it earlier. Yeah. And that's exactly what you've just said.
It was actually the day, and I suddenly we use Slack to run the business, and Slack actually suddenly became a nice place to go rather than a toxic place to go.
Yeah.
And it was like, we should have done this months ago.
Yep. Absolutely.
Why were we living with this toxicity? It was awful, and we shouldn't have allowed it to happen. Yeah.
And everybody, most people are nice people, and we want to see the best in people, and also we don't like confrontation. So it's a tough thing to do, but at some point you have to. And the other thing is, the rest of the team see it, and they're looking at it and going, why the hell isn't Tim dealing with this? Why is he allowing this to happen? So not only is that person toxic, it actually affects the team's view of you as well. Yeah, I mean, we saw the difference the next day.
Yeah, you will do. Yeah, and what you by putting it off, actually, you're quite right. Which is the team are looking at you to say that they know what's going on. It's like, well, why aren't you doing anything about this?
Yep. Yeah, it's a tough one.
Fascinating, Phil. Thank you so much for coming in and talk about it. From the, I think there's some real good takeaways in terms of the interview process, and then also going through this, opening the can of worms of what on earth I'm going to do now that someone's coming in to do my job.
Absolutely.
But sometimes I guess we have to make ourselves redundant, don't we?
Well, you do. I mean, you do. That's the aim. The aim of any business. And you talked briefly about selling a business. You cannot sell a business unless you are redundant from the process.
Yeah.
And it's part of that system.
So remind people where they can get hold of you and where they can get middle ages designer wear or something, was it?
Okay, so it's philfraser.co.uk. It's not philfraser.com, because that's where you get your Robin Hood costumes from. And if anybody, I have just a special free offer for anybody who's listening. I have a 5-minute process for anybody to solve their biggest pain in the arse business problem. So if they email me at phil@philfraser.co.uk, I will send them my pitter patter process.
Okay, fantastic.
Pitter as in P-I-T-A, pain in the arse.
Okay, right, pitter patter. Okay. And it's philfraser.co.uk.
Yeah.
Phil, thank you so much for coming in today and talking about it. It's been excellent. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you so much.